Hi there, this is Linda and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm putting together my Project Life spread for the week of September 30th through October 6th, 2024, and I'm working with a few different supplies from my stash. Let's go ahead and dive right in. So this is the week of September 30th, October 6th, so mostly in October. So I'm going to be using some October products. I have a few things from the Cocoa Daisy kits for October this year. I typically don't use the Cocoa Daisy kits in my Project Life for a set spread because I'm on their creative team. I have to do my projects before the month starts. So I can't obviously document October before October happens. So for that reason, I don't typically use them in here, but I like to use especially some of the dated pieces. And these three cards I really liked for Project Life. I've been using these most times this year. And then I really liked this one as a filler card. I might add something on there. And then I just loved this one for 3 stories. And I made a note to myself, I want to do journaling about Saturday. So my birthday did not fall in this week, it's the following week, but we celebrated that Saturday because that's when my daughter could come over. So I'm going to use this card to document what we did that day for my birthday. And then I wanted to use my stash, but this year I've been working through some older Studio Calico kits and I didn't have one that was October themed. So I decided to dig in my stash for something else and I found these 3 4x4 story cards that are like plastic from Ali Edwards, and I want to add some stories on these. I'm still not entirely sure how I'm going to add them onto those cards yet. I'm thinking I'm going to type it and then cut it out and put like strips on here, but I'm not sure. And then I'm going to put some like pattern paper behind it, which will be a good way for me to use up some pattern paper from my stash. Let me just trim this. My trimmer is getting a little old there, my trimmer blade. So let's see, I went and got pumpkins, so I'm going to put that. And then here's for my birthday celebration. I got my new Paddington Weeks, and then here's pumpkins on the porch. So those are my photos for this week. I think that's kind of how I want them spread out. Then I'm gonna need to go find some paper from my stash to go behind these and figure out how I want to do my journaling on those. And then I'm also going to have journaling here about that one day. I also need to figure out what my 3 stories are going to be for these cards. And then I'm thinking how I want to embellish my photos. I might not put much on them except for maybe on this one where I added these 2 photos of pumpkin onto a 4x6, and I did that in Photoshop before printing. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and put you guys on fast forward and get this one put together. Okay, so this one was pretty fun. I started by going over to my stash and pulling over some pattern paper. I am really bad about using my older pattern papers, so I'm happy that I had this opportunity to do it. You can see here that I'm pulling over pattern papers that I have sorted by color scheme, which is how I have my pattern papers sorted. So I had pulled over like my yellows and then my blues, and you can see some of the papers are not actually blue. In the blues, it's more just like the feel or the main color. And a lot of these papers are from Cocoa Daisy. Some of the ones, the like fold out ones, are older from Cocoa Daisy. Some are from Kelly Perky. Some are from Ali Edwards. So I pulled a few over that were options. And then I pulled out my 12x12 stack of pattern papers that were neutrals. And so I'm going through a few of these trying to decide which one I want to use as a background. And I briefly considered doing like 3 different ones, but I ultimately decided on doing the same paper for all 3 spots, just to have a little more repetition and consistency across my spread and use up more of my stash rather than cutting into 3 different papers. So I'm just trying all of the different ones here. While I'm going through that process, I wanted to talk a little bit about including these plastic squares in my spread. So I said in the introduction section that I was looking for some other thing for my stash to use. And I really loved the idea of pulling this like collection of things that I had in my stash out and use that as the jumping off point for my spread. And so I'm thinking a lot recently about my 2025 Project Life plans. And as you guys know, the story kits are going away. So that is one less kit I have per month to work with. There are going to be quarterly kits, which I will continue to use in my Project Life. However, there's currently quarterly kits from Ali Edwards that I'm using in Project Life and the monthly story kits. So it's definitely a lot less kits. I will still get the stories by the month kit, and I will still get my Cocoa Daisy kit, but for the rest of the weeks, I do need more products, and I don't need to buy more products. I need more products to use. And so what I want to do is create some spreads similar to this one where I find a stash item like these story cards or a larger embellishment or just an embellishment, a card, something from my stash, and use that as a jumping off point for more of my spreads. So this was a good kind of like test run of that concept, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. So I plan to share more about that in 2025. But let me know if you like that concept or if there's specific types of stash products that you want me to focus on for a particular spread. I kind of like the idea of having it as like a challenge and picking a product in advance. And maybe I will share on Instagram the product that I'm going to use and see what you guys think before I plan out my spread or put it together. We'll see. Just some random thoughts. Anyways, I selected this paper, which I believe is from Studio Calico, which is an older paper, which is another change this year. Starting in 2025, they're no longer making scrapbooking products or documenter kits other than stamps. And I hadn't been picking up stuff from them for a while, so it wasn't that big of an impact on my crafting, but they were a brand that I use pretty regularly for years and one that I always intended to kind of go back to. So it's a little bit bittersweet that there's just going to be less options out there. There's also kind of unknown from the paper person, Kelly Perky Shop. So yeah, there's really just not a ton of options anymore. So I'm going to kind of use this as a positive to push me to use my stash a bit more. So anyways, I'm working on my journaling next. So what my initial plan is to tell 3 different main stories on these details cards and then 3 stories from Saturday on that journaling card. And that's going to be my journaling for this week. So I have this sticky note here where I wrote out some ideas of what I wanted those stories to be. I'm basically mapping it out because I know that I need 3 longer themes or stories for these details cards. But I don't have another card this week for my bullet point list like I normally include. So I'm really thinking hard about how I want to kind of arrange the stories. And what I end up settling on for my detail cards is one is going to be about my 2025 planners. This week, I finally got my Paddington Weeks, which I have a photo of there. I went over to my friend Jen's house to pick it up from her because she had ordered it for me from Hobonichi directly. And then I have a story about some of the frustrating things that happened this week. There were actually 2 separate stories that I paired together on one of the cards. One was about just some fighting with Verizon because they're always the worst company. And the other one was about an employee quitting on me, so having more work to pick up from that. And then the last one was about my birthday gifts. So this card here that I'm stamping on, I'm going to tell the story of Saturday. And on Saturday, I did 3 kind of main things. I got gifts from my boyfriend and my daughter for my birthday. I went to go pick out pumpkins with my daughter for my porch. And then I went out to dinner with my boyfriend and his family for our birthdays. So I journaled about that on this card, but then I wanted to actually share a little bit more in my spread about the actual gifts I received because I was really spoiled this year and super happy about the gifts that I got. And I wanted to document it a bit more. So I did use one of those detail cards to kind of flesh out a little bit more about the gifts that I did get. On this card here, I just did some stamping using my regular favorite alpha stamp here from Amazon, which is linked in the description box below as one of my go-to supplies. And then I'm just journaling a bit more about those 3 things that we did on Saturday. Next, I'm going to figure out how to do the journaling on those details cards. So they, like I said, are like a glossy, clear plastic. And at first I kind of thought maybe I wanted to use like a paint pen on them. I know that like just writing with a normal pen is probably not going to work well on them. It most likely will smear. Maybe I could have tested some, but I didn't really have like an extra space to test on, which is one of the reasons why I didn't go with the paint pen. So instead, I decided to use my typewriter. If you haven't seen in one of my recent videos or on my Instagram, this typewriter, this is Olive. So meet Olive. It was one of the gifts that I got for my birthday. And you can see here I'm struggling to load paper because I'm still learning how to work it. But I have since figured it out pretty well. So I've got it down now, I think. But anyways, I'm working on typing out my journaling to put on these cards. So my plan is to type my journaling in strips, and then those strips, I will cut them apart and adhere them down on top of the details cards. So you will see that process. And like I said, I'm still figuring out my typewriter in this video, so I'm not exactly adjusting the lines properly. And it's a little bit messy, but I'm figuring it out. The other thing I am figuring out is that I'm a very, very fast typist. I have been typing for a very long time. And, I type for my main day job a lot. I'm an attorney. So I'm a very fast typist. But I'm learning that you cannot type fast on a typewriter like this, because if you hit two keys too close together, the little hammers for whatever they're called, for the letters, will hit each other. And then they do not work. So I am struggling to kind of slow down my typing speed. I also think I mentioned this in another video, but some of the letters are in the wrong spot on this typewriter, and I was trying to Google it, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. I think this is somewhat refurbished. Like I said, this was on my birthday gifts, but it came from someone who like fixed them up and everything. So it came in full working order, but a couple of the keys are not in the places that you would expect them. The W and the Z have been swapped, and the M and the colon have been, not the colon, the semicolon have been swapped. So sometimes I am typing the wrong one of those because I am such a fast typist that it's kind of hard to untrain my brain of the correct way to type. So I'm still figuring out how to type with this, but long story short, I got it to work. And so I typed out my journaling that I wanted on my first one of these details cards. Then I'm using my paper trimmer to just trim them into strips. And then I'm going to use scissors to kind of trim them down a little bit more and make sure that they're not too thick. I definitely caught my blade on there. Sometimes my blade is a little bit dull because I tend to not switch it as often as I probably should, because I don't know, it's just, they're expensive. Well, they're not that expensive, but they add up. So I like to make things last as long as possible. So here you can see me using my scissors to trim them down when they are not perfectly straight or a little bit thicker than I wanted. I am trimming them, and I apologize that some of them are kind of going off the screen with my trimming, but you kind of have to look at it very closely, and I wanted to do it precise. And then I'm working on putting them in order. Next, what I'm going to do is use rolling adhesive to adhere them down on top of the details cards. And what you're going to see me do here, I feel like some of you will cringe, and like I'm going to cringe while I'm doing my voiceover, because what I'm doing is I'm using my rolling adhesive and just doing it directly on my table. So I'm getting like a strip of rolling adhesive on my table. These do come off, but they are kind of a pain to rub off. And I tend to do this pretty often, but when it's like one or two, it's not that big of a deal. But for all of these strips, I ended up with so much adhesive all over my desk. It took me such a long time to get it off. It was so annoying. So in the future, I'm probably going to get like a mat or something so that when I'm doing my adhesive, I don't have to worry about the adhesive sticking all over my desk. For those of you who are wondering, this is just like a cheap IKEA table. I actually use IKEA dining room tables as my desk, but I purposefully have not invested in high quality desks because I know I'm going to get paint on it. I'm going to cut into it. I'm going to get adhesive on it. Like, I want my desk to be a place where I can play with products and not worry too much about, making sure that it stays nice. So while I have at this stage in my life been upgrading a lot of the furniture in my house, my craft room is staying IKEA because I like that it is, not precious, right? Okay, so I finished adhering those down, and then I'm just going to adhere it onto this pattern paper for now and move on to the next one. I'm going to put a little music on so you can actually hear my typewriter in action at a little bit faster than normal speed because, like I said, I can't type that fast. Okay, I hope you found that as kind of soothing as I did. I don't know. I like the clicky clack sound of this typewriter. It's just a lot of fun. And the ding when you hit the end of the line. And I learned how to kind of adjust the line width to get it to be the width that I wanted, which was the size to fit on these cards. And if you don't have a typewriter like this, you could definitely create the exact same effect by printing this out on your computer. But I find it just kind of fun to use the typewriter. And I like the just imperfect look of the type from the typewriter. So I did the last two cards at the same time because I definitely was just trying to test it out for the first one and make sure that I liked my process. But now that I know how I want them to be, I did the last two at once. And I am cutting them into strips now, just the same, basically the same pattern that I did before. I had to sort of eyeball the length of journaling I wanted because I wasn't entirely sure how long I wanted each of these or how much I needed to fill in the card, but I can kind of adjust a little as I'm adhering them down, and it's okay if it doesn't go all the way to the bottom. Okay, so I'm trimming them down and then I'm going to adhere them on here. And again, I'm going to make the same ridiculous mistake with my rolling adhesive, getting it all over my desk. But you guys will be happy to know that I have since cleaned it up and I'm not going to make that mistake again. So while I'm working on these, I think I'm just going to talk a little bit more about my plans for my 2025 documenting because I did recently share a video of my 2025 journal and planner lineup, which if you haven't seen that one, I would recommend going and watching that one next. If you are not really a journal or planner person, I do also include some stuff on my craft planning. So if you are someone who does just like the scrapbooking and you follow me for that reason, you still might get something out of that video, and you definitely can skip around and only watch the planners or journals that you are interested in.
But I did not share a video about my 2025 craft plans, and I do think I will share a little bit more as I get closer to the new year and set up my 2025 albums. But for now, I didn't really think I needed to do a video because it's not really changing that much. I have pretty much been set in my system. And with the journals and planners, I'm newer to that community. And although I've kept a paper planner for as long as I can remember, I'm newer to having it more of a creative outlet as opposed to just a functional one. So jumping around from planners and journals is still like, I'm still learning a bit about my process. Whereas with scrapbooking, I feel like I'm very much set in my ways. I have been scrapbooking for over 20 years, which is pretty insane to think about. So I'm just, I don't know. I feel like I have found my groove of what works for me. So moving on to what I'm actually doing. So for Project Life, I'm going to continue Project Life in the exact same format that I'm using this year and that I've used in previous years. Basically, I'm doing weekly spreads with a little bit of modification as needed. So for example, if I go on a vacation, that will be its own spread, even if it's not truly a full week. But besides that, I will do weekly spreads that run Monday through Sunday. And I'm going to continue using the 9x12 size. I purchased my 9x12 albums from not Studio Calico. Wow, what am I thinking? I purchased my 9x12 albums from scrapbook.com. I have used the Studio Calico ones in the past, but as I said earlier in this video, they just discontinued making them. So buying albums, I think the 9x12 size is only available from scrapbook.com at this point. Ali Edwards does still have a few in stock, but I don't think she intends to stock them regularly. She is going to stock them only as they fit projects. And for her projects, she tends to not do the 9x12 size. So if you want albums for your annual documenting, especially if it's something where you're going to want to have them uniform through the years, I highly recommend scrapbook.com's albums. I purchased some white ones again. I'm again going to do 2 pages per year, or 2 albums per year, with a 2-page spread per week, just like I've done this year with some additional inserts as I feel like it. I'm also going to keep my mini-me albums. That one I am switching up a little bit. In the last few years, I have been doing them in 6x8. And for 24 and 2023, I had 2 albums to make up the year, 2 6x8 albums. And when I was looking at what I wanted to do for 2025, part of what I wanted was to use up my stash of products. And I surprisingly didn't have 2 6x8 albums that I thought would work well for that project. But instead, I had some other albums of different sizes. So what I decided to do was use some of the albums that were released from Ali Edwards this last year, or this year, for December daily, specifically the 10x8 and the 4x6 albums. So what I'm going to do is, instead of doing 6x8 story albums and having them for 6 months of the year at a time, I'm going to tell stories for the full year in the 10x8 size and the 4x6 size based on what stories fit in which size album. I will continue doing 6x8 spreads, and those will just go into my 10x8 album. I'm going to jump back to what I'm doing on screen because a lot has happened. But basically what I did once I finished adhering down all of my word strips was I took this over to my sewing machine and I just stitched it down in a square around the edge of the plastic. Totally unnecessary, just to add a little bit of texture. They were already adhered down, but I just wanted something else on top of them. And then I'm just going to arrange them on my spread. So I'm bringing my spread back over so you can see how everything looks. I have all my journaling done. I have all my pockets filled, and I definitely could just call this spread good at this point, but I wanted to add a little bit more to it. So I went into my stash of chipboard and I pulled out one just to add on here for this photo of pumpkin. I actually put 2 photos onto a canvas in Photoshop before printing them out, and I added a chipboard piece on there. And then for my title card, I'm using this October card from Cocoa Daisy. And they have had these in every monthly kit, and I believe they're going to continue them in 2025 in the pocket card add-ons. So I have been using them as a title card where I just highlight the week. with a mild liner. This was the week of September 30th through October 6th. So the 30th is actually not on that calendar, but I just highlighted the empty Monday spot and I figured I'll be able to figure it out in the future. And then I went over to my stash and found some cork stars and some white word phrase strips, and I'm just pairing those together on a few of my photos. I'm adding a word phrase strip with a cork star and adhering them down just to add a little bit of something else onto the spread. I didn't want it to be too busy, but I did want some sort of embellishment repeated across the spread. And that gave me the opportunity to use up some of those cork embellishments that I've had in my stash for a very long time. I feel like companies aren't really coming out with those anymore, which I'm kind of happy about. I like how they look, but I don't feel like they hold up over time. And so I'm happy to kind of get them out of my stash and used. And you know, I do like the way they look, especially with this brown pattern paper for this spread. I really like how the colors kind of coordinate on the spread with the browns and the oranges. And it really kind of says fall, which is what was happening at this point in time. I'm just going ahead and slipping everything into the pockets, and then I'm going to be able to call this one done. I am so sorry that my hair is ending up in the screen. I try not to get it in the way, but I had to trim this one down a little to get it to fit into the pocket. For whatever reason, sometimes the photos are not the right size to fit. That card there, that autumn one, was also from Coco Daisy, and I had considered adding something on it, but I really just liked the way it looked. So here's a look at that completed spread. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, I hope to see you guys on the next one. Bye.